Yeah, I'm seeing it right here. Before the video even begins, I'm banned from banking. Folks, welcome back to The Narrative with me, your host, Vrilliam, the host with the most and the most mitzvot. Folks, big conversations happening on X today. Looking forward to getting into it. But first, before we do, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified anytime I make a new post. I mean, come on. You guys know the drill by this point. Folks, X today, there's one word going around. Islam. Yes, Islam. All you keep hearing is about Islam. I said it in my last video. According to all these news pundits, you'd think we were days away from Sharia law taking over the United States. Like, I don't know if you guys saw, right now people are accusing one Tucker Carlson of working for Qatar and Iran, saying he's working for insert Muslim country here. Big tweet came out recently from one Shabbos Kestenbaum. The day I never have to mention Shabbos Kestenbaum's name is the day I can die happy. Shabbos Kestenbaum is everything I hate about modern America. And I try not to be a hateful guy. I really don't consider myself as such. But man, he makes it so easy just to hate him. I mean, he tweets out this whole spiel at the time of filming, 1.2 million views, claiming that basically there was some plot to take over the government by the Iranians. And so something of note here, Shabbos Kestenbaum obviously is a specifically Chabad Orthodox Jew. What do they believe? I mean, he's here throwing his stones. What's his house made out of? That's what I want to know. Well, something to note about the Orthodox tradition is a huge emphasis on the Talmud, more specifically something called the Gemara, which we'll get into. But it seems people are talking about the Talmud, and all the replies on this are immediately saying to Shabbos Kestenbaum, well, hey, wait a minute, you believe all sorts of funky stuff. You believe all sorts of weird shit. And I've seen people speak about the Talmud, but no one's made a video explaining what it actually is, what's actually in it from like a unbiased perspective. So today, I would like to take an objective and easily Gentile explained look into infamous Talmud. Now, let's be clear about what we're talking about when we say Talmud. People think the Talmud is just a book that you can go buy. It's not. The Talmud that we're largely referring to is the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud. Little background. So Talmud itself is two specific big books, big compendiums, the Mishneh and the Gemara. Everything starts with the Mishneh. Now, Jewish tradition holds that when Moses received the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, he also received the Mishneh, the oral law. Ugh, oral law. I don't like the sound of that. That's innuendo withstanding. The oral law is the passed down oral tradition of the Jewish people. It's more extensive and expansive than obviously the 10 Commandments. It's believed to have been upheld by the priesthood, the Kohanim. If you have ever met someone with the last name Cohen, that's the priestly bloodline. If in modern day you have the last name Cohen, you are like your ancient ancestors were part of this priesthood. Now, obviously, 70 AD, Jews get expelled from Jerusalem and the temple no longer stands. So what originally was held solely as an oral law being passed down and around in the temple, that can't exist anymore. So a bunch of the original chief rabbis got together and decided to write it down into a proper compilation called the Mishneh. Now let me note, there's one Mishneh, okay? One Mishneh. It was written basically 200 AD, written by a guy named Judah Hanasi, or Rabbi Judah the Prince, very important, chiefly rabbi in Jewish history. The Mishneh itself is specifically split into Sederim and covers the 6 mainstays of life: agriculture, festivals, marriage and family law, civil and criminal law, temple rituals, and purity laws. Now, the Mishneh itself, this isn't really what we're worried about. The Mishneh itself is actually pretty basic. It's not nearly as long as the Gemara. It's like pretty basic stuff. It just reads as kind of religious rules. What people are specifically interested in is what happened with that. So the Mishneh gets written. Fast forward now, a couple of hundred years. This is the basis of Jewish life. You have to understand rabbinic Judaism, that's like the full name of Judaism. The idea that Judaism is diet Christianity or it's Christianity without Jesus, That's not the case. That's a very, very popular misconception. It is its own thing entirely. It's very, very different from how we believe. Judaism is a rabbinic tradition, meaning it's a legalistic tradition. This is why it's easier to identify modern religious Jews with the Pharisees or the Sadducees than it is to, reference them to being the early Christians. Most simple way you could break it down is that they believe that Moses gave the law. When I say the law, I mean this grand overarching thing about every single aspect of life. Everything they do has to be seen from a perspective of the law. This is actually why historically their literacy rates were very high and they made great lawyers, is because their religion is basically based around reading a book of law and then debating law. This is the center of their faith identity. And so, debate the law, they did. This is where we get the Gemara. Now, there are two Gemara. There's the one from Jerusalem and the one from Babylon. Now, the one from Jerusalem, which has now been put together as the Jerusalem Talmud, so the Mishneh plus Jerusalem's Gemara, not that big. That's not the one we're really worried about. Obviously, it's not that big because they didn't stay in Jerusalem that long. They didn't have a permanent presence there. Their history with Jerusalem is them kind of getting brought in and then kicked out over and over again. So Jerusalem Talmud, not that big. It is the Babylonian Talmud that you specifically are interested in. That's the big one. Obviously, Babylon, modern day Iraq. So when the actual Jewish diaspora starts, the temple gets destroyed and they get kicked out of Jerusalem, a lot of them go into the Persian Empire. This is because historically Jews and the Zoroastrian Persians had pretty good relations. If you read the Old Testament of the Bible, there's a lot of praise for Cyrus the Great, for Koresh. A bunch of them were like, hey, 1,000 years ago, the Persians were very nice to us. Why not give them a call now? And so they did, and they went up into Babylon, and they lived a pretty good life there. This allowed for the flourishing of the Babylonian Talmud, of the Gemara. So let's note, Mishneh, 200 AD, that's the basis of the book. Gemara, written now at this time, it's a series of debates from the rabbis living in Babylon about what the Mishneh says. This is the background. This is where we get the Talmud. Now, you may be saying to yourself, okay, this seems pretty standard. I mean, obviously, it's a little confusing, but we're talking about like over 1,000 years of history here. Of course, it's going to get complicated. And let me note, I am going to have to skip over some things like important peoples. I'll list here like the rabbis who are responsible for the Babylonian Talmud. There's a bunch of them, and I'm not going to break down every single one. All of this begs the question, okay, what's in this book? Like what's in it? Now, the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, this document that we're talking about, it's organized like the Mishneh, where it's put into 6 parts. The 6 Sederim, like I talked about before. However, now those big 6 are split into 63 tractates, or in Hebrew, Mesachtot. Let's recount 6 Sederim, 6 big major orders, 63 tractates. Now, the 63 tractates are the debates. It's like copies of the debates that occurred. I'll list them here on the side. We're not going to read every single one. That would be crazy. And come on, that's not why you're here. I know why you're here. You want the crazy shit. So let's get into the crazy shit. Like, come on. We know why you're here. Now, you have to understand, the way in which the Talmud works is that some parts are debates and then some parts are stories. Like they're kind of just thrown in there. All the stories I'm going to bring up are ones that are codified. You have to remember, a lot of the Gemara isn't codified. We'll get into it later, which ones are and which ones aren't and how you know that. But all the stories and passages I am going to share with you are in fact codified. They are part of the law. Because one of the common arguments you'll hear in favor of the Talmud is, oh, well, they're not all codified, so XYZ thing you just quoted at me, it's not codified. Don't listen to that. There is a way to know which ones are codified, and people follow that. I'm only going to give you codified ones. So let's get into some of the weird stuff. Books, baby. Books, you know I love to read. You know I love to review books. I love to talk about books. I like to have books. Listen, I'm crazy for literature. And folks, there is nothing I love more than alternative, banned, influential, controversial political literature. I mean, all sorts of stuff. The stuff you're not supposed to say. Problem is, It's hard to get. Can't really get a lot of banned literature. It's, banned. But folks, that's where today's sponsor, undergroundcanon.com, comes in. Your number one retailer for controversial, banned, taboo, political, cultural, fucking whatever type literature, undergroundcanon.com. They've got everything. They've got left-wing books. They got right-wing books. They've got culture books. They've got social, but they got fucking everything, dude. I love the service that they provide. I love what they're doing. It's a small team of really dedicated, really cool people. They offer great prices, and they are overall a company that you absolutely want to support. So if you, or maybe someone you love, someone in your life, a friend, a coworker, maybe not your boss, is into controversial, taboo literature, be sure to go to undergroundcanon.com and use code VRILLIUM for 5% off your order. Get yourself some books, whether you read them, whether you just want to have them, whether you want to take a picture with them, I don't know, whatever. Get them for whatever reason you want, but make sure you get them from undergroundcanon.com. Again, use code VRILLIUM for 5% off your order. Now, folks, let's get back to the video. Now, you have to understand, things like witchcraft or sorcery, while to us may sound conspiratorial and somewhat insane, it's part of the Talmud, significantly. You have to understand, the rabbis of old, they weren't just religious teachers. Rabbinic Judaism, because it surrounds rabbis, the rabbis are seen to have a spiritual power. That power being kind of equal to that of God. The Jewish perspective on God is not the same as the Christian or even the Muslim perspective on God, where Christians and Muslims believe that God is this ultimate deity, this single monotheistic ultimate deity, whether it be the Muslims' Tawhid or the Christians' Trinity. They believe it's one singular entity that rules over everything and nothing else is equal to it. Jewish perspective is that God is kind of this overarching energy, like a sentient energy that is equal to that of the Jewish people. That instead of being above the Jewish people, it's behind the Jewish people. It's pushing the Jewish people forward. There are several occasions in the Talmud wherein the rabbis get into a debate with God and then win. I shit you not. There are several times wherein the rabbis debate God and then win the debate. And God is oh, you rabbis, you got me. And then the law gets changed. A great example is the story of Onkelos. Rabbi Onkelos, very important, famous, early Jewish rabbi, believed to be a convert. Let me note that. Obviously, Onkelos is not a Jewish name. He was Greek. They believe he was a Greek convert. Now, we don't actually know whether or not this Rabbi Onkelos existed, but we do know that there were some Greeks who converted to Judaism at the time because there was a Jewish community living in modern-day Greece. For all intents and purposes here, Onkelos is part of that community. And specifically, his origins are traced a lot in the Talmud because he played a pretty big role, supposedly, in helping compose the Mishneh. So they tell his origin story in the book in grave detail. Onkelos, the son of Titus's sister, wanted to convert to Judaism. He went and raised Titus from the grave through necromancy and said unto him, "Who is most important in that world where you are now?" Referring to hell. Let me note, hell and the afterlife is real in Judaism. You might hear a lot from Reform Jews that there is no hell in Judaism because it's not directly mentioned in the Old Testament. There absolutely is hell in Judaism. They talk about it a lot in the Talmud, a lot. They call it Gehenna. It's actually where Arabs get the word Jahannam from, in reference to the valley of Gehenna, a real place on earth where the Israelites used to burn their trash and shit. So he says, who's most important in the next world? Who's honored in heaven? Titus said unto him, the Jewish people. Onkelos asked, should I then attach myself to them here in this world? Meaning, should he become Jewish? Titus said to him, their commandments are numerous, and you will not be able to fulfill them. It is best that you do as follows. Go out and battle against them in that world, and you will become chief. As it is written, her adversaries have become the chief, which means that anyone who distresses Israel will become the chief, meaning a great leader in the world. Onkelos said to him, but what is the punishment of that man in the next world? Meaning, how do you get punished if you do that? That which he decreed against himself as he undergoes the following. Every day his ashes are gathered, and they judge him, and they burn him, and they scatter him over the 7 seas. So they torture him, they pick him up, judge him every day, and every day they go, yeah, you're guilty, and then scatter him into ashes again, and then send him into the ocean. That's the punishment that Titus received for fighting the Jewish people. Onkelos then went and raised Balaam from the grave through necromancy. Balaam, let me note, is a demon. If you're a Christian or a Muslim, you believe that Balaam is like a demon. He said unto him, who is most important in that world where you are now? Balaam said to him, the Jewish people. Onkelos asked him, should I then attach myself to them here in this world? Okay, we get it, okay? Balaam said to him, you shall not seek their peace or their welfare all the days. Onkelos said to him, what is the punishment of that man? Balaam said to him, he is cooked in boiling semen, as he caused Israel to engage in licentious behavior with the daughters of Moab. This is again in reference to the story of the Bible, Book of Numbers, with Balaam. Now, here's the big one. All of you have been waiting for this. I know this is the one you're thinking of. Onkelos then went and raised Jesus the Nazarene, Jesus Christ. Let me note, he is referred to throughout the Talmud several times as Jesus the Nazarene, or Jesus of Nazareth. This is, again, mind you, Christ means Messiah, and obviously Jews don't believe that he's the Messiah. But he gets mentioned as Jesus the Nazarene, which is to say, Jesus, that guy from Nazareth. Jesus said to him, their welfare you shall seek, their misfortune you shall not seek. For anyone who touches them is regarded as if he were touching the apple of his eye. Basically, he's warning Onkelos, saying, I touched them, I messed with them, don't do it. It's really bad. They are the apple of his eye. They are God's favorite. Onkelos said to him, what is the punishment for you? Jesus said to him, he is punished with boiling excrement. As the master said, anyone who mocks the words of the sages, the rabbis, will be sentenced to boiling excrement. And that was his sin, as he mocked the words of the sages. The Gemara then comments, come and see the difference between the sinners of Israel and the prophets of the nations of the world. As Balaam, who was a prophet, wished Israel harm, whereas Jesus the Nazarene, who was a Jewish sinner, sought their well-being. Now, that's important to note, because they're saying here, Balaam actively tried to hurt Israel, the Jewish people in the Bible, and he's punished. Now, they claim that Jesus was seeking the well-being of Jews, but he was wrong. He wasn't the Messiah, and he was wrong, and he made fun of the rabbis, or really, he questioned the rabbis. In trying to do what was right, he questioned the rabbis, which was the worst thing you can do, and that's why he receives the worst punishment of all. So yes, they do, if you've heard that they believe he's boiling in shit, yes, not only do they believe that specifically because he questioned the rabbis. The questioning that's being referred to here, if you read the New Testament, when Jesus speaks to the Pharisees, he who is without sin shall cast the first stone, all that is what they're referring to. Because he did that, Jews believe he is burning in a pot, I guess, of boiling shit. You may be asking yourself, what the fuck? And that's a proper response to have to such a shocking piece of information, but it has to be noted and remembered. Jesus, again, is not seen as the Messiah, and again, to question the rabbis, i.e. to question those who deemed him not the Messiah, is considered a very, very grave sin. Because like I said before, they believe that the rabbis kind of harness the power of God, that God is behind the rabbis, and God uplifts the rabbis. So the rabbis, very, very important. You can't question them. If you question them, you're out. That's the Talmud, man. Like I told you, they believe in magic, and they believe in all this kind of folksy stuff. Another great example of this kind of narrative structure is how they speak about Jesus, and more specifically, his mother. Lord, forgive me for even reading this, okay? Here are some quotes about Mother Mary. His mother was Miriam, that's the Aramaic form of Mother Mary, who braided women's hair. So she worked a lowly kind of job. This one strayed from her husband, meaning she was infidelitous, that Jesus was born from infidelity. She who was the descendant of princes and rulers, so from the line of David, as we know from the Bible, she played the harlot with carpenters, basically saying that she was a whore and slept around. They specifically talk about the law surrounding Jesus' crucifixion. On the eve of Passover, they hanged Jesus of Nazareth, hanged referring to crucifixion. And a herald went forth and cried aloud for 40 days beforehand, he is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy. Anyone who can say anything in his favor, let him come forward and plead on his behalf. But since nothing was brought forward, he was hanged. So let me note, if they ever try to tell you that it was the Romans, like it very explicitly says here that they did it, that he was hung on Passover for questioning the rabbis. And there's so many quote, like, dude, I don't want to sit here all day and just read you the Talmud, because that's not the point of the video. The point is to understand like what it is and what these people believe. With all that being said, these are all pieces of law and pieces of narrative. So how do we know what is real and what isn't real? How do we know what is accepted by these people and what isn't? This is where we enter a very important figure called Maimonides. Quick background, Maimonides was a guy who lived in Muslim Spain. Jews during Muslim Spain were very wealthy. They basically became like the arbiters of wealth pretty quickly. He quickly shows off his talents as a rabbi. He can speak several different languages. He's very smart. He probably was autistic. Let's just be honest. Like if you read his writings, like this is a guy who could memorize like huge passages of text. He moves to Egypt and he begins his life's work, a book called the Mishneh Torah. That's confusing, right? Because we've talked about the Mishnah. This book is not the Mishnah. It's just called the Mishneh Torah, which literally means teachings on the Mishnah. Now, again, it's not the Mishnah. The Mishnah is this really, really old book from 200 AD. Maimonides, he lived in Muslim Spain, so the early 12th century. Now, the Mishneh Torah, this is the book that everyone agrees upon. You have to understand, Maimonides is considered the most important Jewish thinker ever. Right now, there are like hospitals named after Maimonides, most famously Maimonides Children's Hospital. And the reason is because he made this book, the Mishneh Torah, where he managed to compile everything and give a definitive answer. This is approved, this is Jewish law, and this is not. And everything I've read so far was approved by him. So what exactly did he believe? Maimonides was most famous for his sheer disdain for Christians. It cannot be stressed how much Maimonides fucking hated Christianity and specifically hated Christians. I'll give you some quotes from him. In the Mishneh Torah, Law of Kings 11:4, he writes, Jesus of Nazareth, who imagined that he was the Messiah, was executed by the court. He caused Israel to stumble and destroyed many. May his bones be crushed. Every single time that he refers to Jesus in the Mishneh Torah, he follows it up by saying, may his bones be crushed. Like every time. This is because Maimonides believed if you said the name Jesus, it had to be used as a curse. You can't use it as a name. This is actually why you don't meet Jews today with the name Yeshua or Yehoshua or really any of the forms of Jesus in Aramaic or Hebrew. It's because the name, according to Maimonides, is a curse. It's like a slur. And so anytime he refers to Jesus, he follows it up by saying, may his bones be crushed, meaning may he be tortured in hell. Another big part of the Mishneh Torah is called the Birkat HaMinim. The Birkat HaMinim is one of the blessings in something called the Amidah. Mind you, the Amidah, these are blessings that are recited 3 times a day. 3 times a day! And the Birkat HaMinim is one of them. Birkat meaning blessing, Ha meaning on, and Minim meaning the infidels. Mind you, blessing, it makes it sound like it's, when we think of blessing, like a good thing, blessing just kind of means like a prayer, and so it can be used in the negative. It honestly, it'd make more sense in English to call it the curse of the heretics. Here's what it says in English. For the apostates, let there be no hope, meaning those who left Judaism, and uproot the kingdom of arrogance speedily in our days, referring to Rome or referring to like Christian kingdoms. May the Nazarenes, that's the Talmud word for Christian, because like I said, they don't call him Christ because they don't believe he's the Messiah. They don't refer to Christians as Christians because that means to follow the Christ. So they call Christians Nazarenes, meaning people who follow the guy from Nazareth. May the Nazarenes and the infidels, Minim, perish as in a moment. Let them be blotted out of the book of life and not be written together with the righteous. You are praised, O Hashem, who subdues the arrogant. Now, let it be known, Maimonides, he didn't write this. This is kind of like synthesized together from writings from before. But not only does he codify it, he says this is like the most fucking important thing you can say. You need to say this 3 times a day. Like this is, he says, if you pray this every day, that's the best thing you can do. Now, you may be saying, wow, that's a lot. Why does this matter? Well, all of this synthesizes down in today what these people believe in modern times, to very bluntly dispel the myth of Judeo-Christian. Like I said in the beginning of the video, we commonly hear the idea that Judaism is just diet Christianity, that it's Christianity, the Old Testament, but just, without the New Testament. That's all it is. And that the religion of Judaism is the same as the religion of people like Solomon, of people like Jesus. But no, this is the basis of the religion. Every single synagogue has a copy of Mishneh Torah because it's the codified, simplest version of what is accepted in the law and what isn't. All of this is to say that the religion is not derived from the Old Testament in the way that we derive faith in the Old Testament. We see the Old Testament as the story of this wise people that were guided by God, and all of it leads up to the birth of Christ, who then redeems humanity. That's not how they view it. They believe that the Old Testament people are their literal ancestors, and that the story is still going on. The story never ended, and that the rabbis, now that's what's important, because the rabbis are supposed to guide the people, because God provided the law and now stands behind Israel, behind the Jewish people, and pushes them forward. This is the Talmud. Well, folks, that is going to do it for us today on this episode of The Narrative. I hope you enjoyed. Crazy stuff, man. I mean, I'm hoping this can do as well as my Chabad video. I'd argue that this is significantly more important than my Chabad video, because the Chabad, Chabad's one group. This is the religion. This is everything. Chabad is one group. They're kind of funky. We get it. This is everybody. Way more important, way more pressing, especially as we are entering this war with Iran, which very clearly has a religious angle to it. But folks, I already have an absolute nightmare of an editing job, so I'm not going to make this fucking outro super long to save myself some time. So, folks, with all of this being said, as I've said before, God bless you and God bless America. In the Christian way, not this way.